Farmers didn't care. This was the beginning of the end. By 9:30 sharp, tractors began sealing off every entry and exit to the government quarter. Keir Starmer declared that anyone participating in the siege would face prison time. But the protesters had nothing left to lose. When you demand £400,000 from farmers earning barely $30,000 just to keep their land, you don't just crush a business, you surrender the nation's food security to balance a broken ledger. And after it, you're stripping assets from the people who feed the nation to fund benefits for new arrivals, effectively buying the next election win with the wreckage of British farming. By lunch, analysts estimated the damage at £82 million. Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves see farmers as millionaires. Yes, their land is valuable, but in reality, they earn pennies. While the main London's highways remain blocked by tractors, the unthinkable becomes possible. Food reserves in the capital's supermarkets will last 2 to 3 days at most. Warehouses never planned for a city besieged by thousands of tractors. While Starmer remains silent, police platoons are fighting to stop tractors from driving straight into the Parliament session. Waves across the country took to the streets demanding Starmer's resignation and holding signs that read, "No farmers, no food." By evening, the government's worst nightmare materialised. Thousands of those the media branded as far-right groups flooded onto the streets. Merged with the tractors and the tanks, it became a nuclear mix. Tonight isn't about a budget dispute. It's about who actually feeds this island and who holds the power to starve it. The columns that breached the M25 highway were not urban activists, and they were not weekend protesters. Many had driven hundreds of miles from the regions, forcing their heavy machinery through police lines that Starmer foolishly thought would hold. A TikTok clip reached 7.3 million views. It showed a police van trying to block tractors' convoy and faced the immediate consequences 8 seconds later. The video was removed in 2 hours, labelled as a violence violations. Waves of protesters didn't come to lobby, they came to siege. A strategy that traces back to a rural population pushed into a corner by a tax policy designed to erase their existence. These weren't traffic jams. They were calculated strangleholds, logistical choke points to see how long the capital can survive without a supply chain, before the government breaks. And tonight, Westminster learned something terrifying. Concrete barriers failed. Armoured vans were pushed aside, and Starmer's administration watched in paralysis. Officers on the ground weren't unwilling to stop them.
All right, first and foremost, I want to give all the praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah, Quadash. I want to give double honor to the apostles and bishops of Great Millstone, and Shalom to the 144,000, the rest of the elect. And so, yeah, pretty much you got mass farmers protests all throughout Europe. And, you know, they're protesting against the unrighteous decrees that are coming out of the government, basically making it harder to just own, operate, and make money off of a farm, to just be self-sustainable without the government. You know, that's pretty much what it's all about. This is a part of the New World Order agenda, you know, Agenda 2030. And they also call it the Sustainable, what is it, the Sustainable Project? I forgot. I think the UN calls it the Sustainable something. And basically, that's what this whole Go Green thing is all about. That's what's leading to these different European Union lawmakers to pass these laws, which is going to basically make it harder for farmers to grow their crops and make any type of money trading their crops, you know, exporting and importing their crops to other countries, specifically South American countries, all right? Because I looked it up on ChatGPT, just a brief summary of what's happening with the farmers' protests in the EU right now. So they're saying that in Brussels, you know, thousands of farmers from across the EU have brought tractors into the Belgian capital and blocked roads during the EU's leaders' summit. You know, the people are basically waking up. They're protesting against this corruption, this globalist agenda, you know, this authoritarianism, where basically they're taking away the rights of the people in the name of saying, you know, for your safety and your protection, for your convenience. These are the words that they're throwing out there to basically just smoke and mirror the whole agenda of just taking away your rights. All right, they're basically just taking away the rights of the people, making you more reliant upon them, the government, because eventually the end goal is to make mandatory the RFID microchip implant, which is the mark of the beast. Because once they digitalize the global economy, and you're going to need that chip to buy and sell, if you have anything going for yourself as far as self-sustainability, example, a farm, you know, you're not going to be tempted or forced to have to take that microchip. But see, if they already have the control over the food supply, over the medical industry, and whatever you want to call it, you know, the education system, so on and so forth, they control every aspect of your life. Well, then it's that much easier for when they make the chip mandatory to not really seem like too much of a choice. All right, to basically pressure you into doing it. So that's really the end goal. But they do these things gradually. They condition, and bit by bit, they bring forth different false flag events, which is the order from chaos. And bit by bit, you eventually lose your rights, and you're trapped in this man's system in which, you're going to be a slave to the international banking families, which are Edomites, according to the Bible, the wicked. And it's more evident now than ever, Proverbs 29, verse 2, that the wicked is in rulership. All right, Job 9 and 24 as well. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. And obviously the wicked is you so-called white people, you Edomites, those of you that are in power, specifically the elites. So reading on, it says, main trigger this week, strong opposition to a major EU Mercosur free trade deal with South American countries, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay. Farmers fear cheaper imports. Examples of beef, sugar, and soy will hurt European producers. And yeah, that's the point. Eventually, the government is going to have complete 100% control over the food chain. And they're doing that here in America as well. You got particular farmers, I wouldn't say they're really protesting, but, they're resisting. But eventually it's going to lead to full-blown protests, just like what they're doing right now in Brussels and different parts of the EU. All right, they're actually doing real hardcore protesting because the police can't even stop them. They're bringing out heavy equipment, those tractors or whatever that they use for farming. And they got their signs up or whatever. And, some of this, there's obviously going to be paid actors there, agent provocateurs that's, there as well. But I think for the most part, this is an organic protest because, these farmers, that's their bread and butter. You know what I mean? And like I said, it's happening here in America too, where they're passing certain laws. They're not giving them the same subsidized and, what Trump has been doing, what Nero 47 has been doing with the tariffs. All that's affecting the economy, the global economy, and the trade relationships. So they had a sign up there saying no farmers, no food, or something along those lines. I put the video, in the beginning of the lesson. Y'all would have seen it by now. So yeah, basically, this is just prophecy. These are signs that this new world order is close, because the Lord said there was going to be people protesting in the world. This is 2 Ezra chapter 9. And I'm going to start at 1 and get straight to the point. He answered me then and said, measure thou the time diligently in itself. That's what we're doing when we see these particular events in the news, global news, alternative news, media, and we see what's going on in the world. We're measuring it through the scriptures. All right, we're filtering it through Bible prophecy to get a timeline of ultimately when the Lord is coming back. All right, but we know that things has to happen chronologically. So we know that we're close to the digital ID thing in January 2026, right? In the UK, they're going to implement that digital ID. If you don't have that, you can't work. If you can't work, you can't make no money. How you supposed to eat? How you supposed to pay your bills? All right, that's going to force everybody to get the digital ID, even though they're making it seem like it's a voluntary thing. See, these are the wiles and the tactics of this devil. This is how he does things. This is why the people are mourning. This is how we know that the wicked is bearing rule. And more you're going to see more people globally all around the world standing up and protesting against this wicked agenda. It says, and when thou seest part of the signs past, which I have told thee before, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. So we're seeing these signs, Matthew 24, the famines in different places, the earthquakes all over the earth. You got the wars and rumors of wars. Russia just backed out some drones in Ukraine. All right, they're using drone warfare out there. And really, they said that's just a phase in their next part of their military strategy, which is going to be even more violent. So, that, things is heating up all over the world. And so these are all the signs that Yahweh Shai gave to the prophets, ultimately to the nation of Israel, beginning with the elect. All right, those that believe. These are the signs that we know. It says, thou shalt understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. So we know that the Lord is going to visit. Let me get Job, the 20th chapter. He's going to visit in the midst of this devil establishing that new world order. Right after the microchip implant, the RFID chip, the mark of the beast, is made mandatory, and World War III intensifies to a nuclear level. That's when our Lord Yahweh Shai is going to have to come back, because he got to redeem and save or deliver the elect of the nation of Israel from the four corners of the earth. Matthew 24, verse 30 and 31. This is Job 20 and 22. In the fullness of his sufficiency, he shall be in straits. It's talking about the elites of Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, the banking families, as they're setting up this new world order, the fullness of his sufficiency. You know, they've already taken over the world and they own the whole financial system, the global financial systems, all right, the central banks. They control the governments of the world. You get an example of that by looking at the World Economic Forum and the UN. You know, whatever policies these people make, the governments of the world, they make it law in their country. All right, so we know that all of these politicians, so-called, in these governments, including the ones in the top seat, Nero 47, they all sold out to the elites. So they're in the fullness of their sufficiency because they're getting ready to set up the New World Order, Agenda 2030. They're coming down with great wrath because they know that they have but a short time. But it says, every hand of the wicked shall come upon him. This is when you got to get into the Hebrew to understand what that means. Because if they're the wicked, right, the scriptures say that Esau, Edom is the border of wickedness. Well, then what's every hand of the wicked coming upon them? That word in the Hebrew there is imol.
Strong's H 6001. A male. A male.
Well, yeah, he's saying it in the Yiddish, but it means laborer, sufferer, wretched one, laborer, workman, toiling. See, isn't a farmer, isn't that toiling work? Dealing with all them cattle, dealing with all that equipment, having to plant the seeds, you know, plow the ground, plant the seeds, harvest it when it's ripe. Then you got to, you know, ship it out or however it works, you know, move it into the inner city. That's a lot of toiling. That's a lot of work and labor. So the question is, why is their hand coming up against the elites? Because look at what they're doing. They're passing these unrighteous decrees, all right, grievousness that they prescribe by law, which is basically making it harder for farmers to live, making it harder for them to operate their business, live off of their, you know, land, so to speak. They're basically making it impossible, all right, because it's going to be so expensive and there's going to be so little profit to make off of it that it's not even going to be worth owning a farm. It's going to cost you more to own a farm than what you're going to be making from owning that farm. And yeah, I forgot to mention, that's part of the whole GMO agenda as well, which is all part of 2030 and, you know, the New World Order. But you got Bill Gates buying up farmland, talking about we're going to eat bug meat and all of that, all this fake food. You know, that's also a part of it. They got to get rid of the organic farmers, the ones who don't want to spray all that pesticide and, you know, chemicals and poison on their crops. Or they won't be allowed to sell their crops to anyone unless it has these pesticides. And all of this is just to give them ultimate control over the food chain supply, so where people don't have no type of power over what they're eating. So that this way they can control what you eat, when you eat it, how much of it you eat, ultimately through that chip and through programmable CBDC money, digital money. So this is what the people are waking up to, and this is why they're protesting. This is why every hand of the wicked is coming upon the elites. They're feeling that resistance, all right? The people are not having it. Just as the prophecy states, it says, when he is about to fill his belly, Yahweh shall cast the fury of his wrath upon him and shall rain it upon him while he is eating. See, so this is when the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. And when they're starting to fill their belly, when they're starting to fulfill this new world order, that's when Yahweh is going to cause the angels to loose the four winds that it speaks about in Revelation, the 7th chapter, which is that destruction, that nuclear destruction. And this is when World War III is going to get to that nuclear level. And ultimately, America, Babylon the Great, is going to be destroyed by that fire. But it's going to be a third world war. The scriptures say the earth is going to reel to and fro like a drunkard. Missiles are going to go off from one end of heaven to the other, back and forth, from Russia to America, back and forth. That's ultimately when Yahweh is going to reveal himself. But even right now, as we speak, the scriptures say that the Lord shall visit thee with earthquake and thunder and storm and fire. And all these things are happening all throughout the world, as well as all the chariot phenomenon, the things that's happening in the heavens, you know, the different signs in the heavens as well. Back in 2nd Esdras 9:3, therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars of the people in the world, then shalt thou well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning. So these days were already prophesied, Habakkuk 2 and 3. The visions were for appointed times, and we're living in that appointed time now, the end, the latter end of the end. So basically, you was going to have people all over the world rebelling and protesting against this devil and his new world order. That's the visions in which the prophet saw. Uprising of the people, sedition among men, 2nd Esdras 15, and I think it's 15 or 14, when it speaks about how they're not going to regard their kings nor princes. And why is that? Because the people are waking up to the fact that these politicians are corrupted. All right, they're down with the elites' agenda. They sold out, and they sold their own people out. These governments of the world, they do not care about their citizens. They do not care about their people. The people is nothing but slaves to the new world order, to the beast system. And the sooner people wake up and realize that, you're going to see protests like this all over the planet Earth, which you already do. But, you know, specifically here in America, it's like you got no noise, man. You got no activity. These weak-ass protesters with these signs, fucking niggas with blue hair, and, you know, these proud feminist bitches in the front of the protests thinking they leading something. Shit is a joke, man. But soon these things are going to get violent, and these people in America, they're going to have to protest. These so-called white men here in America, they're going to have to make a stand against the United States government. Remember, Nero 47, he's in the midst of setting up this insurrection act. So even the elites, they know that there's going to be mass protests throughout America as they clamp down more with this new world order, you know, oppressing the people. So check this out. I asked ChatGPT, is this mentioned in Bible prophecy about either the farmers or the crops? And it says, yes, the Bible does mention farmers, crops, and agriculture in prophetic context, though not as modern policy protests. They're usually signs of judgment, hardship, or the last days. Here are the clearest examples briefly. And I'll just read through some of the examples. I may get some of these scriptures, or, you know, I'll probably get like one or two and then close it out. But they put that Revelation 6, 5, and 6, the third seal. It says food becomes extremely expensive, a day's wages for basic grain, often interpreted as crop failure, inflation, or supply disruption. And that's exactly what that is, that black horse. Matter of fact, let me get it. Let me get that one. Revelation chapter 6, start at verse 5. It says, and when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And beheld, and lo, a black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. So in the ancient world, how they dealt with money, you know, which is actually gold and silver, that's real money, not the modern day fiat paper useless dollar. We talking about gold, silver, and substance, but how they would measure it is they'll put it on scales or balances. All right, so this represents what? Basically an economic collapse. Like I said, inflation, global economies collapsing, including the American dollar, which is being de-dollarized as we speak, is losing value by the day. That's what the balances represent. Verse 6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. So it's telling you this measurement of what it's going to cost to eat. That penny is not a modern day penny, not 1 cent, an American currency. That word penny, I'll let it play.
Strong's G 1220. Denarion.
Denarion, which was basically the Roman currency. And like it says, denarius equals containing 10, but that's what the word means. But it's a Roman silver coin in New Testament times. So this was the Roman currency, denarius. All right, it took its name from it being equal to 10 asses. It was the principal silver coin of the Roman Empire. And this is the point. From the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, it would seem that a denarius was then the ordinary pay for a day's wages. And Chat knew that because it said food becomes extremely expensive, a day's wages for basic grain. See, so that's how expensive things are going to get, because the supply chain is going to be completely disrupted, and you're going to have hyperinflation. All right, that's what I meant to say earlier. I said inflation, but it's going to be hyperinflation, which basically means that prices are going to be skyrocketing on a daily basis, by the second, by the minute, by the hour in society. It's going to become impossible to afford anything. And that's going to create a man-made famine in which people are going to have to rely upon the government to eat. Ultimately, they're going to have to take the RFID microchip implant to eat, but not the men of the Lord, not the servants, the prophets of Yahweh by Shemiah, because the scriptures say, my servant shall eat. The Lord is going to feed us during the time of famine. That's why it also says, see thou hurt not the oil and the wine, which represents his truth. All right, the men that's in this truth is not going to be affected by these troubling times. I wouldn't say not affected, but there's going to be a way for us to escape and not fall into that temptation. Revelation 3:10, this is the hour of temptation, in which when everything fails, you know, the global economy collapses, they make everything digital, and then they introduce the chip. The men of Yahweh Shai is not going to fall into temptation because they can't eat or they can't afford their bills, or, you know, we're going to have to be homeless or whatever the case may be. That's not going to make a man of the Lord bend or break into taking that microchip, into falling into that hour of temptation, because Yahweh Shai said, I will keep thee from the hour of temptation. 1 Corinthians 10:13 lets you know that the Lord is going to have a way to escape. He said he's faithful, that he's not going to suffer us to, I'm roughly paraphrasing, he's not going to suffer us to be tempted above that we can handle, but will with the temptation make a way for us to also escape. All right, so yeah, we're reading about these troubling times, and, you know, especially in Revelation, when it deal with this horse, it talks about the pale horse who had death and hell sat on it. It's going to be terrible, man. You're going to have a lot of people dying from famine. 2nd Ezra 16:18, I always think of that scripture because it said the beginning of these things, the beginning of famine and great death. See, so I'm glad that chat put that in there. All right, let me see what else it says. Matthew 24:7, Luke 21:11. Yahweh Shai says there will be famines among the signs of the end. That's right. So we're at the end. We're at the very end of the end. Crop failure as judgment. You got Joel chapter 1 verse 10 through 12. Fields are ruined, grain destroyed, farmers mourn. And yeah, that's heavy too, man, because you have all these so-called natural disasters. All right, we already found out that these devils have weather manipulating technology called HARP. All right, they could create storms and floods and fires and all these things. They're using laser weapons to blast these particular farmlands. And these farmers are suffering. Like I said, directly mentions farmers suffering due to environmental collapse. And all these things are being done man-made. You got Bill Gates creating GMO mosquitoes, GMO locusts, releasing them into the world. What you think that shit is doing? Destroying more crops, man. See, this is like a plague. This devil is like a plague upon the earth. All right, he is deaf. The scriptures tell you that he's as deaf in hell and can never be satisfied. He can't even let a man just live off his own land that he bought and paid for. They're not trying to let nobody live without the government, be self-sustainable on your land, living off the land, so to speak. They got all these laws, you know, land tax. People went the right way, did it the right way, the legal way, did all of that. And look what he's doing, man. He's releasing unnatural disasters upon your land and destroying it, man, flooding your crops out. You know, look what's been happening in America for the last couple years since the COVID-19 thing, man. It says control for food. Well, they got Amos 4:6-9 as well. Droughts, blight, and failed harvest despite human effort. Right? It don't matter how hard you working when you got this damn devil ruling over you. He gonna just come and destroy all the work and the labor and the toiling that you've done. And once again, people are waking up to this, man. So yeah, they gonna go out there and protest. Yeah, they gonna get violent. There's gonna be sedition among men. There's gonna be an insurrection against these wicked politicians, man. These sold out politicians. It says control for food. This is an interesting one. Revelation 13, the mark of the beast system. Buying and selling is controlled. Many interpreters connect this to food access and economic pressure, though not explicitly farming. And I'm going to just end it right there, man. That's a heavy point that chat made. See, chat is able to see it, but you got Israelites that are so-called debaters and teachers and called self-proclaimed prophets in this thing, and they don't know that. They don't know that this prophecy show you that they're going to basically control everything. And all you got to do is look at who controls the economy now. How do we buy and sell now in 2025 and see that these people have an ultimate agenda to digitalize that same very fiat economy that they've created, this usury-based, you know, interest rate-based economic system, which is wickedness according to the Bible, the borrower's servant to the lender. And that means they basically created debt slaves out of all the nations of the world and all citizens of the world that owe the central bank debt. All right, we're all slaves to them elites, man. And they've done that strategically. They're the wicked that the Bible speaks of. And you got to be blind if you can't see that these people are the devil and Satan that the Bible speaks of. And these are the people that's fulfilling these end time prophecies. All right, all the oppression and the corruption that's going on. And ultimately, yeah, that mark of the beast system, like Chad just said. They're going to control the food. They're going to control the water. They control electricity. They're going to control every aspect of your life. And soon they're going to do it by using that digital ID. That's how it's going to all begin. All right. And then the digitalizing of the money, a global economic collapse, you know, the paper money, they're going to do away with that. It's going to be a cashless society. And then they're going to introduce that RFID chip and make it mandatory. All right. And that's when we're going to see who the true men of the Lord are and who are you fakes and phonies, man. Talking about these false leaders of these other camps, man, that's not telling their members, not telling their congregation, their church, that the RFID chip is the mark of the beast, and not even warning them that's currently being set up. They can't even go into prophecy because it has no part in their doctrine. Ultimately, they don't have the testimony of Yahawashi, which is the spirit of prophecy, because they don't know the prophecies. So they can't even go into these current events. They can't tell you what's going on in the world, why it's happening, what it's going to lead to. They just talk about the same thing every week. We're Israelites, the so-called white man's the devil. We know that. Why they not talking about the digital ID? Why they not talking about digital economy? You should be asking yourself that. These things are happening right before our eyes. We're living in a world that's changing as we speak. All right, these prophecies are coming to pass. Habakkuk 2 and 3, once again. The vision is yet for the appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. So these guys are being found to be liars and false apostles. They're not the prophets of Yahweh Shemel Shah. They're dumb dogs. They can't bark. They can't give you any warning of what's actually coming. So anyways, with that, I'm going to say, Kol Haloyim, La Yahweh Shemel Shai, Ba'ashem Rakak Wadash. Hope and pray you were edified through the Holy Spirit. To the elect of the nation of Israel, Shalom.